Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Folks, we got a great show for you. First, let's get your reaction to the third hearing from the January 6th committee. What did you think? This particular hearing was all about the former Vice President Mike Pence. We'll have your response and share some details about that. Also, second segment, let's talk about the new and latest USA Today Suffolk poll, which shows President Biden's approval rating takes another hit. Wow. I'm going to explain to you what the numbers are and the impact. At the 4 o'clock hour, let's talk about observing Juneteenth. We check in with the Movement for Black Lives to give us some insight as to how we should start to really observe this day that's coming up tomorrow. We'll have that conversation. And then later, let's talk about Lizzo, the artist Lizzo, saying that she decided to change her lyric because of the backlash she got from the community of the disabled. I got some questions. I got some real questions. So we're going to have that conversation. All of that on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. You ready? So let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. It is Friday. A lot will be happening this weekend as folks are getting ready for Juneteenth celebrations. Father's Day is on Sunday and so much more. And I know there are a lot of different events celebrating African-American history, Black history across this country. So there's going to be some big conversations happening about our history. And we'll talk about that, of course, later on in the show. But we wanted to start the conversation talking about what happened with this third hearing coming from the January 6th committee. This third hearing is the one that's focused on the pressure campaign that former President Donald Trump had placed on his former Vice President Mike Pence to disrupt the electoral count and vote certification process. This is the one big thing that led to what we saw on January the 6th. And it gives the hearing gave us some detail about what happened, the morning of, the hours before January 6th, and so much more. So I wanted to get your reaction to this as we're going through this process step by step. And now, and also considering the fact that some new details emerged about how former President Donald Trump said, you know what, we're going to do some things, even if it's illegal. Constitutionally, lawfully illegal. Wow. All right. Also joining us will be our culture crew member. We got my brother Shanadu in Kwafor, to talk to us about this. He's our diversity, inclusion, and equity specialist to discuss this whole situation. Shanadu, good to talk to you again, brother. How are you this afternoon? We got you, Shanadu. All right, looks like we might be having some issues here, some technical issues. Let's get your camera on, Shanadu, if you can. All right. Look, this is, all right, let's check in with Bakari Jones. Bakari, thank you so much, Bakari Jones, who is an activist, strategist, working within the LGBTQIA community. Bakari, good to see you, sis. How you feeling this afternoon?
Peace, Farajii. Peace, man. I'm glad to be back.
Good to see you. Yeah, it's always good to talk to you. All right, so Bakari, let's jump into your neck of the woods, politics.
Man.
When we look at this situation here, we just saw hearing number 3, 4 more to go. And I've been really looking at this, and I just have to say this, Bakari. It doesn't look good for President Trump, and I'm saying in terms of how far this dude went to try to stay in power. But then the other part of me is like, this is America. This is America. Like, you can have all of the evidence right in front of you. Mm-hmm. And the situation can go left like very, very quickly. There can be a wall of denial that is coming in. what I thought was fascinating, I think one of the big takeaways is the amount of pressure this man put on his own vice president. And then when his own vice president had told him no repeatedly, I'm not doing it. That's illegal. It's unconstitutional. It's not the right thing to do. Then he just starts blazing this guy. Like he really gets in on him, calling him a wimp, just goes in on this man. I'm like, damn. But that just goes to show you how much loyalty President Trump has to everybody around him. And I'm always surprised, Bakari, that people around Trump, they want something from him, they gain something from them, but not understanding the situation of this dude will throw you straight under the bus if he needs to.
Who they're actually dealing with. Yeah.
So what was the big takeaway for you from this situation? And folks, post your comments as we should have this conversation posted in our YouTube page and the Facebook page, and we'll certainly get to them. But what was the big thing that stuck out for you in this hearing right now?
I don't know that it's necessarily anything new, to be honest, Farajii. I think that when I look at this, I think, Mike Pence is by no stretch considered he's not someone that we see as like aligned with the Democrats. He's not, Republican light, if you will. Mike Pence is somebody that, I would consider a Republican's Republican, right? And to see, for lack of a better word, to see Trump's sort of betrayal of someone of his own political party, I don't think it's something that is new that we've seen from Donald Trump. I don't think that's nothing new for him. I think we've seen that it's kind of the Republican Party, but I think what a lot of folks that I've heard commenting are referring to just President Trump's ego, former President Trump's ego, and how that sort of supersedes the political party. So I think that it's what sort of jumps out to me, and what I think is something that we can all take note of, is that if this is the level of disregard that Trump had for his own vice president, then it's sort of like all bets are off when it comes to anyone that opposes his viewpoints, right? It seems like it doesn't really matter your political party. It really just boils down to whether or not what you are doing, your actions, whether or not they are going to support Trump or not, right? That's it. To some extent, it makes you think maybe it's less about the party and more about whether or not folks are siding with him. So that to me is what's sort of interesting to see, the way that that he would disregard. I think from a higher level, it's not anything surprising. When I think we all sort of take a step back, unfortunately, it's that, we're just sort of seeing white supremacists battle it out with each other, so that to me is sort of, again, where do we have the opportunity to sort of shine light on what exactly is going on and how it could potentially benefit those of us who are combating and dealing with the oppression that they've created. Facts.
And I think that's part of the other issue. Like, it's what I'm seeing coming from the GOP is like one of the biggest, and I never thought you would see a political party serving as an enabler of one man's ego, right? Like, are you serious? You mean all these people in the party just decided to just acquiesce and bow down to this guy? Like, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, scary, it's disturbing, but at the same time, for me, it's fascinating, because as I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, is this for real? Like, are we at this place right now? I mean, out of all of the leaders of the party, the patriarchs of the party, the luminaries of the party, Donald Trump will go down as one of those people. He will go down as what Ronald Reagan did for conservatism, what Donald Trump is doing for extremism. You know what I mean? It's like he will go down as a huge part of the GOP's history and their interests. So I'm just blown away by that. But the other part about it is, and this is the thing, John Eastman, who is he is a professor and he's an attorney. He teaches law, and he's a conservative Trump attorney. And he's pumping up the president to say that there is a way that Mike Pence can disrupt the certification process. But here's another thing. He told Trump too that, look, I don't know if it's going to work because it's borderline, it's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could do it based upon some old policy called the Electoral Count Act of the 1800s, but hey, it may not be the best plan, and Trump just runs with it, and Eastman is helping him to run with it, and it's like, this is insanity. Mm-hmm. This is absolute insanity.
Which to that extent, it kind of shows that although Pence is he's had some just incredibly just anti-Black and anti-queer perspectives and stances on things, but to even see him sort of saying, I might have these perspectives, but I'm going to still color inside the lines when it comes to this. He's not willing to go outside the lines. And I think that Trump's sort of turning on him shows that, if there was a space or a time where he believed that he could break the law for Trump and be protected and sort of be in Trump's good graces, I think Trump has made it really clear that, if he's willing to turn on me, there's not going to be any type of immunity, so to speak, that he could sort of hide behind. So I don't know, Farajii. On one hand, it's like it's fascinating to see like this is really happening, and then at the same time, it's like we know better than to expect anything other than a complete circus from those that are in alignment with white supremacy. So,
real quick, let's talk about the other part, and then I'm gonna start bringing some comments in. The other thing that was fascinating was that the mob was actually 40 feet away from the vice president, who they wanted to kill the man, and they even have Trump advisors on tape saying if they would have gotten close enough, they would have literally killed that man. And there was another story that ran in the New York Times that said that President Trump, once he heard that Mike Pence was running for his life and they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," he was in the White House watching TV. One of his advisors said, "Mr. President, they talking about hanging your vice president." He said, "Yeah." He literally told the man, "Yeah, I would agree. I think Mr. Pence should be hung." Wow. Let's go to some comments right now. Folks are checking in from across the country and, of course, from our Facebook and YouTube page. Folks, share your thoughts, your reactions to hearing number 3 of the January 6th committee. Chris, checking in. Chris, always good to hear from you. There should be more than enough evidence to indict Trump. I want to hear more evidence on the people who are a part of trying to overthrow the election, like Jeannie Thomas, Sean Hannity, the GOP, etc. Yeah. And I think that what this is doing, Chris, to your point, I think there's more than enough. Like at this point, I'm convinced. I mean, let's not act stupid about this. We all know that Trump lit the flame, that he did all this stuff and behind the scenes to make sure that January 6th happened. He wanted some craziness to happen. He wanted it. He was putting it out there. This is going to be wild. Like this, he wanted something to happen. He wanted to get the crowd all riled up. And the moment he said, "I'll march with you," and guess what he did? He marched only to his motorcade to get the hell out of the area. He wanted this to happen. That's what took him so long for him to say something. And then that's why we're in this situation today. So I like to see, I think there's enough evidence. But again, if the GOP, since they don't have the testicular fortitude to deal with this dude, then guess what's going to happen? The rest of America, we're going to have to figure something out. Chris, good to hear from you. Lana, checking in. Lana, loyal watcher, BSN, and of course the culture and RMU. Lana checked in and said, "Psychopaths will psychopaths." He definitely represents the heartbeat of America with the KKK. What he does, and Lana, you know it, and like I know it, sis. What he does is he was able to tap into something. He was able to tap into a level of white power and extremism that we knew that existed, but he gave a huge nod to Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and all them guys to come out of the shadows to do what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. He became their leader, the de facto leader. Even though the crazy part about that, if you study the modern white power movement and how these movements started, these movements are actually anti-government. They're not just anti-Black or anti-Latino or anti-LGBTQ. They're anti-government. And so it's interesting that they take a stance that I would think is not in their interest to stand with Trump and to, I just don't get that part. But they're anti-government. Mm-hmm. They're anti-government. Bakari, what's your take?
I don't disagree, brother. I think that, I guess I'm just in a space now where, if we take a step back, it's like, to your point, Farajii, all of these folks sort of were challenged, invited. Invited is probably the more appropriate word, invited to step out of the shadows. And so it's like, who do we think sent the invitation?
I mean, right? Of course. Exactly.
That's really all it boils down to, right? And they did so with a great level of confidence. So I think for us to have to keep, talking around it or pretending that that's not the case. I'll be honest, I think for me personally, this is, it's hard for me to keep up with because it's like, it feels like so much of the same that we've seen where we see, again, folks that are white supremacists that have those types of ideals that we see them continue to get, to be excused and be, continue to be tolerated. So I'm hoping that there's enough evidence, but I'm not holding my breath for.
I'm not holding my breath
either. For what's how this is gonna continue to unfold.
I am not holding my breath either, Bakari. Yeah. Let's go back to the comments, and we also want to bring in Brother Shanadu and Brother Shanadu, who is our diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist here. And Shanadu, good to have you here, brother. Yes, sir. Let's go back to the comments, and then Shanadu, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Dizzle, my man B Dizzle, checked in and said, look, I don't get into the whole this is us thinking. This is about precedents that can issue, that can sink, swim this us. I think this is being taken more seriously than some may want to believe. I think so too. Here's my caveat to that, Dizzle, and then Sinead will get your take on this. My caveat is this could be a new opportunity for Black folks and marginalized communities in this country to have some very, very real discussions about what democracy should look like. Now, I know that's a big conversation, but don't have everybody to jump on this bandwagon. I'm speaking of the January 6th committee to talk about attack on democracy when a democracy been whipping our ass in this country, right? For Black folks and marginalized communities. So if this is an attack on democracy, okay. So now that we're at this point, can we at least have some different conversations of what democracy, quote unquote, should look like in terms of representing all the people? Sinead, what's your take?
I think, thank you, Farajii. I think when we say attack on democracy, I think it's interesting when that statement is thrown out, it makes me believe that this is what it took for you to say attack on democracy. When people who look like you are now the ones attacking you. That's what's an attack on democracy or whatever. But there are so many things. You can walk into any Black urban city and you'll see the attack on democracy. You go to states like Georgia and see what they're doing with voting laws. That's an attack on democracy. It's interesting that this case of January 6th is what's getting the great headlines. I feel like it's just a play on words. There are many forms of attacks of democracy, and sometimes they come from democratically elected folk in the first place. But I think this committee and how they're presenting it, interestingly enough, in my opinion, I would say this quote unquote attack on democracy, in my opinion, is more or less a play on the hatred for Donald Trump, right? Yeah. And about what happened, because what about the other attacks on democracy that are ignored? But I really do hope that what the January 6th Commission is doing becomes the harbinger on how all government officials and elected folk and will be held to the fire for when they go against what quote unquote democracy is. But that word is always very interesting to me.
Hey, and Sinead and Bakari, it's very interesting to me too. And let's not forget the fact, and we talked about this yesterday, you have more than 100 Republican candidates that have won their primaries that have aligned themselves to President Trump. Candidates that are looking to fill in powerful seats, states attorneys, Congress people, and many other powerful seats around states across this country. And let's not forget the fact that you got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. You got people who are already in Congress right now who have aligned themselves to white supremacist views. So now, okay, you could go after Trump, but you got these little minions. This is like a movie of Despicable Me right now. Like you got these little minions just running around who want to. Where is that level of defense against those individuals, folks that are already in it? Trump is out of political office, but his minions are still there. So how do you root them out of the system? That's the big question. All right, let's go to one more comment. No longer the GOP. It's the Tea Party. T standing for Trump. There is the GOP, there are conservatives, and there is the Trumpistas. I remember, and then Mike, you might be on to something, because yesterday one of you said that you're going to start, you know how we see R for Republicans and D next to people's name? We might start seeing the letter T next to people to show them that, oh no, I'm not Republican or Democrat, I'm a Trumper. I'm a Trumpist. And you know what? As funny as that may sound, Bakari, the reality is we might see that. But now, if that's the case, here we go. How would the Democrats respond to this idea? The Democrats will often say that this is the party of the big tent party. Well, will you respond favorably if Black people or Latino people or Native Americans or if anybody from LGBTQ decides, you know what, we're going to branch out on the Democratic side? Will that be a problem? So because it's going to be interesting to see how this whole two-party system respond, because I really believe that this might lead to a crazy-ass third party that's not in the full interest of the American people.
It'd be interesting to see. I'm not as versed in terms of like the statistics. I wonder statistically how many folks, if we were to like to branch that off like numerically, what portion of the largely like Republican Party would they represent, and how much momentum and fortitude would they actually be able to amass?
Right. Exactly. Go ahead, Sinead. Yes, sir, bro.
I was going to say what the Democrats should really be concerned about is how many of these Democrats that will branch out will go Republican. Because remember, look at Maryland as an example. Maryland is a Democratic state, but Democrats in Maryland voted in the Republican governor and excused former NAACP president Evangelos, who was running, who was a great candidate and who I worked for. But what I learned is if the Republican Party continues to be what they are, but then you have certain Republicans who, in some people's opinions, are not quite like Trump and are pretty decent, I will call them quiet Republicans, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The Democrats will go for them because that's what happened in Maryland. And the Democrats should be very careful about that.
Very careful. That's a great point, Sinead. That's a great point. And here's the other thing. Someone mentioned it because in the chat, talking about the Poor People's March that it's going to be led by Reverend William Barber tomorrow in Washington, D.C. That can serve as another outgrowth from the Democratic side of the aisle, where you have poor people, quote unquote, low wage workers, those who have been often overlooked and marginalized, who say enough is enough of big money politics, enough is enough of politics that don't include the working man and woman of this country, who are both Black and white and Latino and make up of a large coalition. That might be the outgrowth of what we see. I mean, and if that becomes the case, this is going to be a different a political system, a different governing system in this country. And I don't want anybody to think that the two-party system, I don't know, Bakari and Sinead, I don't know if the two-party system will last, will sustain itself. Because after this hearing, when you see all of this madness, you see how much a sitting president, with the extreme and the measures that a sitting president took to stay in power. Mm-hmm. What's stopping us from breaking up into a different party? I know it's another part of the conversation, but at the end of the day, we're seeing something here with these hearings, and it's going to be fascinating and highly interesting to see that over the next 4 hearings, like what is going to be the synopsis, what is going to be the closing argument, the closing statement, that it's just about Donald Trump, or is it going to be that America is in peril right now, politically and socially, as much as she is in peril economically and racially? So it's going to open up some doors for some big conversation. And I only hope and pray that as Black folks, as conscious Black people, goodwill, good thinking Black folks, and even white people, conscious thinking, good intentioned white people, that some folks say we have to get prepared, because we don't know what's on the other side of this. We don't know what's going to come up, how November is going to play out, and we certainly don't know what the 2024 election is going to play out. But Black folks need to be prepared. We need to be prepared. All right, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, folks, let's shift gears on the conversation just a tad bit. I'm going to share with you the latest data coming out of the USA Today Suffolk poll that shows that President Biden's approval rating has taken another hit. We'll break down those numbers for you. Also, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about Juneteenth, and let's talk about Lizzo changing the lyrics. You might say, why are we talking about Lizzo? Trust and believe, folks. You don't want to miss the conversation about that one. So stay with us. A whole lot coming up in the second 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Verizon just gave us all a brand new iPhone 13.
We've been customers for years.
We got iPhone 13s too.
Switched 2 minutes ago, literally right before this.
iPhone 13 on us on any unlimited plan for every customer, with plans starting at just $35. All on the network more people rely on.
Love our new Alexa.
It's a Buick.
Yeah, Alexa.
Buick.
Alexa.
It's a Buick.
It's an Alexa.
It's a Buick.
It's an Alexa.
Coach, that's a Buick.
That's an Alexa.
The Buick Enclave with available Alexa built-in.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Hey, Black, I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks. According to a new USA Today Suffolk poll, it looks like President Biden approval rating has once again taken another hit. Take a look at this. I'm going to share with you. There's going to be a number of different sets of data that we're going to share with you. But this first set, take a look at this right now, coming from USA Today, the Suffolk poll, that says that his approval ratings right now are 39%, folks. 39%. Only 39% of Americans approve of this president, of the job he's doing, and a stunning 47% strongly disapprove, and this 16% strongly approve. Now, academic studies have shown that presidential approval is one of the most reliable predictors of what happens in midterm elections, and a rating this low would traditionally signal significant losses for the presidential party, the president's party. So we're looking at a situation of 39%. I want to bring back Culture Crew members, Bakari Jones and Brother Shanadu, to talk a little bit about what the impact of this. This is only the first part of the data. It gets real bleak as we get further along. But Bakari, 39% approval rating, 47% strongly disapprove. What do you make of that? Is that showing that people just don't like Biden? I mean, there are a lot of big things that are on the table, but what do you take from that?
Man, Farajii, it's just not looking good. It's just not looking good. And I think that because of how this particular poll, what this trend tells us about, the upcoming election, I think it's kind of shocking news. I'm excited to hear Shanadu's perspective when it comes to how Democrats should play it, right? But I think that from my perspective, it asks the question, right? Like from a strategic standpoint, what still can be done? I think when it comes to what we're dealing with in terms of inflation and interest rates alone, even if we were to pretend that we are not intersectional people dealing with so many issues, even if we just isolate how the bulk of Americans feel right now about the state of our country's economics, it just would be, I don't know how anyone could frame President Biden as someone that folks have a level of confidence in their leadership. And we know it's not just him, but the folks that he, And it's the Federal Reserve when it really boils down to it. But unfortunately, we're in a position now where he is, being framed and positioned, painted not inaccurately as someone who doesn't necessarily have the fortitude to lead us into a space that we need to be able to create the type of strategies that are going to change the living conditions for Black and brown people. So that's the way that I see it. I see it as a negative sort of signaling of what's to come based on the past years, and what this trend has meant.
Shanadu, is that fair? Is that fair to put all of this on President Biden because the pandemic, of course, started when Trump was in office? Right. The state of the economy, it didn't just happen, in a vacuum. Race relations in this country started way before Biden got into office, and it intensified once President Obama got in there, and then it spilled over, of course, and once Trump got in there. So is it fair? Are people expecting too much from a president that only has 4 years in office?
It is very fair. You have to understand the one who's in the house is the one who takes the joy or the jolt. It wouldn't matter who is in there. I think President Biden, I would say that he should listen to what a good brother, Dr. Martin Luther King, said in one of his speeches, where he said, "Be true to what you said on paper." I think where President Biden's losing approval, in my opinion, is not keeping up with the climate of what those he begged for votes want. The African American, let me tell you something. If Biden can, not with $10,000, if Biden can do that $50,000 per borrower, clear that student debt thing, I think he'd have a better level playing field. But you have to understand, although that's what a lot of the voters want, that's not his baby. His baby is the infrastructure plan, right? That is his own Obamacare, right? The issue with the infrastructure plan that I have is, although it does things that are great for the community, what happens is a lot of African American voters, there's a specific thing that they want. They understand about the benefits that will come with jobs and et cetera, and fiber optics. They hear that too. But there's an ask that they want. And one of those asks is that student loan thing. And I think Biden needs to also understand that during his next election, there's a new generation that's voting. This is the generation that was born when the iPhone 3GS came out and the BlackBerry was being shuffled away. They do not take politics like the ones before do. They care about the environment. They care about, LGBTQ awareness, et cetera, et cetera. If Biden isn't careful, you're going to lose those people, because who that new cadre of voters more appear to look like is people like AOC. And just recently this week, AOC made it clear that she's not too sure if she's going to endorse the president on his next run.
Wow.
And that's because her side of the Democratic aisle, the side that is more, towards Green New Deal and stuff like that, they feel completely marginalized. And I think Biden, it's showing in his numbers. He needs to be really, really careful. People are not happy.
You're saying it's showing in his numbers, but I think it's also showing in his age. And here's why. No, real talk, y'all. I'm telling you, real talk. Because Biden comes from a different political school of thought. The school of thought that we're seeing this president coming from, and I'm trying to pull it up right now, but the school of thought that the president is coming from is from a space of liberalism that is gradual and slow. Whereas the time and the issues of the time demand urgency. I remember Dr. King often talked about that. You brought up Dr. King, Sinead. He talks about the urgency of now. Mm-hmm. That level of urgency, that sense that, we got to get this done. Let me do. See, Biden is still from a space where he's like, look, let's see if we can get some consensus. Let's see if I can shake some hands and get some feedback from across the aisle. And the question, and the thing is, it's not bad to want that, but in this divisive political space, it's like damn near impossible. Like Mr. President, use some executive orders. Use that bully pulpit. Start to really have to show your strength. And Bakari, I might be wrong about that, but I'm serious.
I don't see this as inaccurate. I think that, he is, I would imagine, right? He's deciding how many big jokers you really got in the deck, Farajii? How many can you throw out, right? Is that the play that he wants to make, whether or not it's worth it? But I think to Sinead's point, folks that are more aligned with AOC, one, there's a greater sense of urgency. And I think that younger folks, regardless of where they land on that sort of like political spectrum that we have here in the US, is they're acknowledging that, we're not talking about red or blue, we're talking about green, right? And not to sound ultra cliche, but that's right. We're talking about green, both the money and the environment, right?
Right,
and
right.
All of the money that's tied up in that as well. But,
right.
So it's like there's so much else that's also at play that I think whether it's student loans or whether it's, environmental protection, I think there are ways that I think that President Biden could still demonstrate his commitment to folks that have the potential to change his career trajectory. So.
Absolutely. I want to go to some of the comments because folks are checking in about this. Folks, we've been talking about President Biden. His approval rating has taken another hit. 39% of the folks surveyed say they approve the president. 47% say they strongly disapprove of the president's performance, and 16% say that they strongly approve of the president's performance. What's your take? All right, let me go to let me hear what folks got to say. Davey checked in. Davey Floater. Davey, good to hear from you, sir. Davey said Biden approval ratings crashing like the stock market. Wow. That's sad, man. It's sad because you're right. Davey, thank you so much. Percy Miracles checked in and said, look, if you're voting out of fear, that means the candidates don't have much to run on.
Mm.
But here's my only question to that, Percy. Have the candidates created the environment of fear so you can vote for them? When candidates coming forward before the American people, when the candidates come before any of us, right? They paint a picture of a very bleak world, Sinead. They make us seem like, man, if you don't vote for me, all hell is about to break loose. I am the savior. So it's not necessarily crazy to think that people vote out of fear for certain candidates, because guess what? Fear gets people voting. Fear is a part of the political space that we're in right now.
Yep.
What's your take, brother?
I would say this when it comes to voting, and I'm going to keep saying this to the youth. If y'all think everybody is out of touch, our job is to make sure that this is how this country works. This country works by numbers, right? So if it works by numbers, and the numbers are showing that it's the over 50s that got all the power, but it's the under 50 that has all the numbers. If the under 50s registered and were active voters in local, state, and national elections, the talk of the older generation would have to change. I'm not an ageist, but the reason why Biden does what he does is because what he knows that what he does works. The older ideals are not going to switch to what the newer generation wants until they see it work. Think about all the people that laughed at Elon Musk when he bought that defunct company, Tesla, all them years back. Everybody laughed at him. Tesla, Mercedes, Rolls-Royce, all of them now are doing what? Creating electric cars because he got the momentum. I think it's time for us younger folk to really, really control it locally. Get our Democratic Party to really represent us if that's what we would like, because beyond the president pulpit, something else that you all need to very much pay attention to, the Republicans are strategized to the T. Are you all watching these elections? Do y'all see the positions that they're going for? Stuff like state's attorney, the people who certify elections, wink, wink, January 6th. We have to be careful and we need to be well positioned, because what will happen is we'll put so much work into a president. They'll have the House, they'll have the Senate, they'll have everybody to give us a hard time. We saw it during Obama's second half. We don't need that again, because that is going to take place again. It's inevitable.
And Sinead, I'm wondering too, brother, that is the Democratic Party just looking at window dressing while the Republican Party is focused on power building?
You said it.
Like, does the Democratic Party just focus on looking like they are inclusive, right? Whereas the Republican Party say, we don't have to look like we're inclusive. Yeah, we're a bunch of white males. Yeah, we're older white males at that, right? We got a few women sprinkled here and there. But we're working on power. We're working on gaining power, keeping power, and using power if necessary. Whereas the Democrats, I don't know if they're in that same space, bro. I don't know.
They're not. And I'm sorry, you know that by the election. Do y'all remember when it was all those candidates up there? Look at people like Buttigieg and who are now in his, he's in his office, and Kamala is now in his as a VP or whatever. I think an honorable thing was to, in my opinion, that Biden should have stepped down and let one of those younger folk took the, not just younger, but new, different. This generation, I'm going to keep saying it, this generation, we don't work off of what worked before.
No.
And I hate when people say that these are radical ideas. Do you know the most radical idea ever? Democracy. That's why so many people's faces don't have it. So when people say radicality, I'm like, no. Nothing is more radical than democracy, because even though it works, it's not always accepted everywhere. So I think that there has to be, with the idea of saying that, this country is for all and we respect all, I think we need to see that. I think people need to not forget, with all due respects to Biden, an older white man took the spot that many younger people who were just as qualified won it. And I think when I look
but
at what
I don't know. Hey, but I don't know, Sinedu, if the constituents, if the American people were ready for that. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're going up against an individual like Trump, right? Who, I mean, we can just go down the list of words to describe his capability and competence to lead this country. But the fact remained, in that contest between Biden and Trump, it was like you knew who you were dealing with, right? Who you knew you were dealing with Biden and with Trump. If the Democrats would have gone younger, then that would have been a big, huge risk. And I get that from a political perspective, that could have been a huge risk because you don't know. You don't know if the new person, and whether, even though they might have the energy, even though they might have the most innovative ideas, you don't know if they are able to handle it. Like you do need somebody like to balance. So what Biden did with himself, he didn't really want to run. I think he was kind of like compelled to run by a lot of different people behind the scenes. Like, hey man, I don't see nobody else in the party. That's why I've asked before. It's going to be interesting what 2024 look like because who can galvanize young people. I see Governor Gavin Newsom. I see Newsom out of California possibly running, but there has to be, to your point, there does have to be somebody that fits to get the younger, more progressive folks, and then at the same time assure the older legacy voters that they know what the hell they're doing. And I think, Bakari, that is always been the conundrum for the Democrats. For the Republicans, they're going to just put up whoever they feel like putting up. The Democrats are the ones that are always trying to, kind of playing hopscotch, looking at what the American people, seeing what the wave is right now. That's going to be a little bit harder and challenging, Bakari.
I agree. And I don't think it's Kamala Harris who is going to galvanize folks to on that same level. I think that, to your point, Farajii, I think Joe Biden was the candidate that could win. You know what I mean? When it just comes down to whether or not it's the best candidate, this is the candidate that we think can win. And I think that given what we saw with, the previous election with Hillary Clinton, when she was not the candidate that could win. That just really boils, is what I think what it boils down to. So I don't know who that person is yet, but I think, again, to Sinedu's point, the Republicans are stealthy and consistent with their strategies. They have a much longer game than it feels like the Republicans are.
Yeah, but and here, let's keep it. Let's also just make sure that we have this caveat: the Republicans don't always get it right. They're not the most organized. Their messaging isn't the most inclusive. We all know this, but you know what I'm saying. So we got to get out of our minds that the Republicans are this highly organized. This is the same party that one man came into that had no public service experience ever. This is the same party that one man was able to transform the whole philosophy of the party. So that just goes to tell you that the party didn't know where the hell they didn't have any real direction in 4 or 5 years ago.
Sinedu, go ahead.
You know what I'm saying? So let's not pump them up so much like, man, the Republicans they got it all together. No, they don't. They are scrambling. They hoping and praying. They wish. Look, that's why Mitch McConnell, he might have said something that I actually agree with. He was like, "There's no guarantee we're gonna win in November." He said that. He said, looking at the Republican candidate, because now the Republican Party are attracting all of these extreme thinking people, these crazy people. He like, oh my God, like he knows, like he's like, man, I need to get out of this situation because this thing is going left real quick. He knows it. He sees it, right? Even though he goes along with it, so he's very much guilty of it. But this is the same party that about 5 years ago, folks. Well, I would say 4 years ago, people were like, "Oh, who's going to be the next?" They didn't know. Mitt Romney didn't have it, right? And you can go down the list. Look at the people that they got. Who are they going to put up for the 2024 outside of Trump? Because Trump probably going to get in more trouble. But who are they going to put up that the party can unite itself behind? They don't know. Trust and believe. They're not putting up Josh Hawley. They're not putting up Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're not putting up nobody. This is the same party. They don't even know who they are right now. So both parties are in disarray. And guess what? The American people, we just left there like this. What y'all going to do? Instead of asking what we are going to do. That's the place that I think we in. All right, let's go back to the comments very quickly. We got so many people that's just checking in. I want to hear. Let me see something. We got person T Nixon. T, you posted. You agree student loan forgiveness is Biden's opportunity to quote unquote free the slaves. He is not acting like an abolitionist. He never was.
There we go.
That part.
I'm sorry. Who said that Biden was an abolitionist? He said he had a friendship with Strom Thurmond. If you don't know who Strom Thurmond is, take a look. But he said him and Strom Thurmond were friends. So that just goes to show you, like, he has to get educated. He has to evolve in his personal politics before he can stand before the American people. Felita, Cavett. Felita, good to hear from you. First comment we heard from Felita, I believe. So it's good to hear from that. She said this administration has done a terrible job at marking things they are doing and have done. They have done a lot of good things, but they have not put it out. I've heard that. I heard that agreement. I heard that argument. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this administration should put out more of the good things. But I'm not even sure, Sinead and Bakari, if people will even hear them. We already have these set views of Biden and Trump and the parties already in mind that you could put out a lot of good things. Trust and believe. We'll see how this hearing go. But even if you put out the truth about a situation, I think we're just so far from being open and willing to hear the truth about a certain situation that we may not even know. We'd be like, no, he didn't. Be like, President Biden did something good. No, he didn't. He terrible. We just write it off. Sports said, in order to be better at the game of politics, we need to become more skilled in mathematics generally and probability in particular. Unfortunately, too many of us are afraid of those subjects. Yeah. Here's another subject I would throw out there too, sports. We need to know what political science, we need to know how government works. Mm-hmm. We need to know how government works. Janine said, Janine L. Sports, thank you for your comment. Janine said, Biden is power hungry. He should be working with the understanding he will only be a 4-year president, that he might die before the term, blow the system up with executive orders. Damn. Yeah. I bet you. I'm trust and believe. And I think Sinead and Bakari, I don't think he's running in 2024. It's just too much. He's 80 plus years old. Not that, and again, I'm not an ageist either, Sinead, but that's a lot. That's a lot. I think he took one for the team going this go, but I don't think he's gonna take one for the team. He's gonna be like, one for the team. Hell no, I ain't taking nothing for this team, man. This team gone. Karina checked in and said, look, Farajii, I'm voting as a student of history who understands the direction this country is heading in. Not voting is not an option. Politics are not about personalities, but advancing our interests. I would agree. Karina, you know I agree with that. However, if the system constantly is smacking us in the face while claiming it's peaceful, I think we need to figure out how we're going to respond to that. I think we need to figure that out. So thank you. I appreciate all of the comments on this. Sinead, I know you got to jump off, but what's the one thing you want to leave with us as we look at this whole situation?
I'll say this, because you were jumping on the Republicans, and I am no Republican. I'm a Democrat. I would even say I'm more independent, but I lean more Democrat. But I will say this, even though we may not like what they did, and you made a good point, they're not so organized. But check this out. Donald Trump was a risk, and they took it. It was a terrible risk, but theoretically, that doesn't matter. He was a risk altogether, and they took it. What risk are Democrats willing to take? That ends up becoming the big quagmire. If the Democrats continue to go down the path of business as usual, we're going to lose out. Because guess what? Even if they don't got the presidency, right? You know what they got is just as important? The Supreme Court. So we got to be careful.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Sinedu Wakwafor, thank you so much for being with us. Diversity, inclusion, and equity specialist. We appreciate your insight and analysis, brother. And thank you for being so good for the culture.
Peace.
All right, folks. Look, we're going to stick around. Bakari's going to stick around, but we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, folks, let's talk about Juneteenth, the observance of Juneteenth. You know, what should we expect over the weekend? What are some of the colors? We talked about it. And where should we go with this whole celebration of what happened many years ago with our people in Texas? We're going to have that conversation. Also, I want to talk about Lizzo, how she changed the song lyric in response to some criticism. Really? I'm going to share with you the story because I need to understand something. I need to understand. So we'll have that conversation. So stay with us. A lot coming up in the second hour of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
iPhone 13 on us for every customer. Current, new, everyone. To show the love.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
How about sushi?
I just had sushi for lunch yesterday.
How about tacos?
Automatic emergency braking, one of 6 advanced safety features standard on every 2022 Chevy Equinox. Find new technology. Find new roads. Chevrolet.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. So much that we really appreciate. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to the conversation from the first hour. We talked about the January 6th hearing, number 3, that happened this week. And, of course, we'll be keeping you up to date on all of these hearings, folks. So, you know, don't get mad at us because we do recaps and audience and your reactions to these hearings because it's important. It is very, very important that we have these discussions, especially on these national issues. Then, of course, we also talk about the latest situation with President Biden and his approval ratings taking another hit, folks. Man, oh man, according to a latest USA Today Suffolk poll, they say that the president's approval ratings is just going down, down, down. So if you missed the first hour, you can always check out the replay and hear what we had to say about that. All right, the second hour, folks, I wanted to have a conversation about Juneteenth. Now, I will have my culture crew member here, Bakari Jones, who is an advocate and an activist doing some fantastic work in the areas of nonprofit and doing work within the LGBTQIA space. Bakari, thank you again for being a part of the show today. It's always a pleasure to have your insight and your analysis. Let's bring Bakari back in here if we can, please. Bakari, when we talk about the situation with Juneteenth, and we should be joined by our special guest from the Movement for Black Lives, Sister Amara. She's going to be joining us in a moment. But when we talk about observing Juneteenth, there is still a lot of conversation about how that should be done. What is the best way to observe versus the traditional way that we have observed, quote unquote, Black holidays. What's your take on that conversation, Picard?
Farajii, thank you for having me in the space. Someone that we both know, Lisa Fager, someone that I, see as an elder in this space. She said that we, and it wasn't in like a caustic way, but it was in an educational way. She said, we shouldn't really be celebrating Juneteenth. We should be commemorating Juneteenth. And when she said it, it was, it was like light bulb. Like that's really what it is. So I think it starts with kind of how we frame Juneteenth in general, which I agree in terms of how we observe it. In the past, I have participated in a range of Juneteenth events. Before the pandemic, I hosted a bazaar to bring together a lot of micro businesses in Baltimore through blackownedbaltimore.com. And then in 2021, I hosted an event called Joy Cometh that, was aimed at bringing together micro businesses in Baltimore and artists, especially to celebrate joy. But I think that what was lacking from my analysis was a level of commemoration in terms of what Juneteenth actually is. And it's, I won't say that it's a gift and a curse, but I think it's such a gift that we've been given in our lifetime, the access to influence and power to be able to see Juneteenth become a federal holiday, a day that our folks can rest, period.
Yeah.
In the same way that we may not all celebrate Thanksgiving, but we have the opportunity to just rest and still be paid, right, in this capitalist country. But that said, I will say that one of my goals is to figure out for myself and for my family what it looks like to commemorate Juneteenth, and not to fall victim to just sort of paying into the sort of capitalist approach that we oftentimes take to holidays. One of the things I will say about the city of Baltimore, we are having AFRAM this weekend.
Yeah.
The mayor, I'm not necessarily saying this is squarely on the mayor, but the decision was made to have AFRAM this weekend on Juneteenth. And for me, I don't know that I could go as far as to say that that's anti-Black, right? But on some level, it's not lost on me that we now have a massive festival that has an incredible amount of corporate backing taking place on Juneteenth on a weekend that's specifically in a majority Black city like Baltimore. In years past, just last year, I know there were easily over a dozen events taking place on Juneteenth, right? That are now sort of cannibalized by a much larger event in terms of scale and financial support taking place on Juneteenth weekend. So seeing that also play out the year after, we have the gift of it becoming a federal holiday, seeing that also happen in our lifetime has making me really sort of take a step back and say, what does it look like, one, to create celebrations, events, engagements of all sorts that really commemorate what this holiday or what this, what Juneteenth is actually about. So that's for me. I feel like I have a lot of more self-work to do around it. But I think that, we see it as something that I know there are a lot of folks that see it as divisive. But for me, the first thing that really comes to mind is it falling victim to a level of capitalism and that level of extraction. Let's have something where we can throw up red, black, and green colors. Everybody can make the money. We can have the Juneteenth day party, and that's it. And like I said, I have played a role in that myself in the past. So I am personally taking a step back and really kind of evaluating with myself what that's going to look like in the future, and the level of commitment that I'm making to commemorate such a remarkable.
It's a powerful moment.
Right. So
absolutely. And I think that and I think that's the perfect segue for us to bring in our very special guest, Dr. Amara Anya, Doc, and encourage her to be a part of this conversation as we talk about observing Juneteenth. How do we commemorate this great historical moment And most importantly, how do we set the precedent for how Black people preserve history as part of this conversation? Doc, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. You are a policy strategist for the Movement for Black Lives. So we thank you for your time with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Doc, I want to start with something that I read from it was an op-ed that was posted, and Keenan, if we can post this op-ed on. This comes from Pastor Forrest Buster DeSoris, but it also was an op-ed that was written in collaboration with Opal Lee, who serves as the quote-unquote the grandmother of Juneteenth, who's been doing the work of making Juneteenth a national holiday for many, many years before this point. But Pastor DeSoris says Juneteenth is at risk of failing to be a source of unity. In these partisan times, there's a tendency to ignore or politicize it. There's also a danger of commercialization. Think corporate attempts to trademark the word Juneteenth, which would cheapen this celebration of justice. Regardless of color, creed, or country of origin, all Americans should oppose these trends with all the urgency we can muster. If we forget the meaning of Juneteenth, we have little chance of continuing the progress this day is meant to spotlight and spark. Doc, I want to get your take on that. You know, do you feel like the reason that this is a polarizing holiday, or is this a holiday that can really, actually, realistically bring people together? What's your take?
Well, I think the question is not necessarily whether it's a polarizing holiday. I mean, it's a holiday that was formally established at the federal level a year ago, but it has been celebrated, commemorated for years before. I know on the west side of Chicago, for years, I was going to a Juneteenth parade that they used to do, that they did long before had this sort of national awareness. And we have to understand that even the national awareness at this level was largely in response to the uprisings in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, and this overall demands that Black people were putting forward after, just kind of seeing what has continued to happen in this country. And so I think the question is not so much if it's a polarizing holiday, it's a holiday, right? But what ends up happening is we have to keep our eyes on the ball in terms of what our fights are. And so it is very on brand for a holiday to be commercialized in this country, in this capitalist system. We had corporations coming out with new flavors of ice cream, and I heard about a watermelon salad and all of these products. It is very on brand, and it's unfortunate because when we speak candidly about it, it really is, they are capitalizing on Black pain, they're capitalizing on Black death, they are seeing the struggles of Black people as an opportunity to make money, to generate revenue, to increase profits. And that's plain and simple what it is. And so they do it for many other holidays, any standard, your Christmas, your Valentine's Day. I mean, they're all commercialized. So why wouldn't they then take Juneteenth and attempts to commercialize it? It is just, unfortunately, in this kind of system that we have, this is the knee jerk, this is the default. For us, though, as Black people, we have to make sure that we're constantly steering back to what is the goal. Our goal is not to just, celebrate, yes, but it is also systemic and structural change. The fact that Juneteenth commemorates those in Texas learning about emancipation or finding out about emancipation, it should recall in our minds what it is that we're fighting for, which is we have these unjust systems, education system, tax system, economic systems, that our demands also have to go beyond symbolism, which unfortunately has come to characterize a lot of these moves that we see at the federal level and even at the local level. It doesn't take away from the importance of Juneteenth as a day to commemorate and as a holiday. However, our focus has to be on the substance. What are our substantive demands, and what are the substantive changes that we're pushing for that will transform this society into one that actually reflects the values that we care about?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's the part, Doc, where we need some clarity. How do we make sure that Black folks across this country kind of buy into this idea of, as you said, recalling what the ultimate goal is? Because, you know, I mean, and of course, in this capitalistic system, we're seeing a various versions of what this day should mean. So how do we get a collective buy-in to say, hey guys, like, okay, yes, it's a time that some people would say that we should celebrate, but at the end of the day, we're talking about fighting for freedom. We're talking about fighting for justice.
I think we constantly have to accompany the message of commemorating and celebrating with, and by the way, here are the policy changes, here are the systemic changes that we're pushing for. You have to do them side by side, because when we don't, we get a lot of tokenism. We get members of Congress wearing the kente cloth and kneeling instead of what we're actually asking for and what we're demanding. So you have to do the two simultaneously. Yes, we can commemorate. Yes, we can celebrate. Yes, we should be observing and recalling, you know, just the historical significance of this date. But we always have to accompany it with, and we're living in an unjust system. So yes, you established this as a federal holiday, but what are you doing about the education system? What are we doing about mass incarceration? What are we doing about this tax system that disproportionately harms Black people? And forcing them to continue to confront that, because we haven't really, even with these companies that are commercializing Juneteenth. I mean, my question was, well, what are your hiring practices and your promotion practices for your Black employees and Black staff? What kind of culture have you created for your Black staff? Do you have Black vendors in your procurement departments? Do you contract with Black vendors and Black businesses? Start there. No one asked for ice cream. It's not in any of the circles that I know.
We didn't. Especially not that flavor, Doc.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So what are we really doing? Start in your own house. Are you paying your taxes as a corporation? Or are you shirking your responsibilities that contribute to the imbalance that we see in this country? You know, again, what kinds of vendors and Black vendors are you actually contracting with? How are you hiring, promoting, creating a culture that is supportive of your Black staff? Start there. That is much more impactful than some new product that you can roll out hoping to increase your bottom line.
Absolutely. I want to get some comments from our audience members as we're having this conversation with Culture Crew member Bakari Jones and Dr. Amara from the Movement for Black Lives Policy Strategist. Post your comments on our YouTube and our Facebook page, folks, and we'll try to get to as many of your insights as possible. All right. Aaron Nelson checked in and said, look, for generations, people have celebrated Juneteenth by reflecting and relaxing. Don't make every Black holiday be work.
Respect.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how to really. I'm gonna be honest with you, Doc. Aaron, I don't know how to take that. I don't know how to take it, because a part of me feels like we have been relaxing. Like, if you know what I mean, we have played like, oh, okay, cool, this is a day for us to celebrate. But when have we not done it? We've done that with every holiday. Oh man, Memorial Day. We talk about honoring those fallen soldiers. You know what I mean? Like, a part of me feels like, no, we should be working. Why not work? Work in our interest, work for us. It don't have to be working for your job or for the corporation and all of that. But you can go out and still do something for your people, even on Juneteenth. But I got mixed reactions to that. What's your take on that, Doc?
Yeah, I mean, there is value in Black rest, right? So it's not, Black folks have been exploited, and our labor exploited for generations, right? So there is value for Black rest. However, Juneteenth as the day it's a day, right? So regardless of what happens on that day, if you're out working for the people or doing whatever, or if you're out resting, our responsibility, and I'll say my responsibility as someone who is an advocate, as someone who works on behalf of Black folks, is to make sure that in the spaces where we're pushing for change, we have to keep pushing that message. We actually do have to keep working, because we know that when we don't, we get a lot of symbolism. Because our fight is not, we're not pushing necessarily Black folks. This is in the spaces in government, and the federal government that just now has given a total of $54 billion to Ukraine, but we can't pass a package to make sure that we have a child care tax credit, or to make sure that student loans are canceled, or to make sure that Black folks have what we need. Or we're not talking about reparations, but we just gave $54 billion in total now to Ukraine.
Right.
That is what's happening now, whether we're resting on Juneteenth or not. And so for those of us who operate in the space of advocacy for our people, we know that we always have to be juxtaposing so that they don't think that just because you at the federal level commemorated a day that Black folks have been commemorating for a very long time means that you've done the work, because they haven't done the work.
Facts. I love it. I love it. All right, let's go back to the comments, folks, as people are checking in. Let's go to Richie Porton. Richie, I hope I'm saying your name. Yep. Okay. Richie Porton says materialized mindset will always cause division amongst the people, rich and poor, free and enslaved. Very interesting. Yep. And I think that's the big thing about this too, right, Doc? Like we're trying to create a new precedent for how we move forward on not just having conversations about our history, but we're also trying to create a new precedence on how we're going to respond to that history. And I think that's the part that I'm trying to emphasize, and I use this platform to emphasize, like there's going to have to be a different mindset. Absolutely. Like we can't expect to get freedom if we're still thinking like slaves. We can't expect to be liberated if we don't even see ourselves being at a better place.
Absolutely. I mean, revolutions are revolutions of the mind first, right? So that, at least in my understanding, it's a revolution of the mind. So our mind state determines how we move, what our actions are, what those next steps are. And so we have to have a change in our mindset. I also want to point out that this notion of division, oftentimes the division or divisive is used as a way to attempt to silence, or to, when there's attention specifically for Black people, to sort of move away from the focus on Black people. So they say that critical race theory is divisive. Talking about race is divisive. Yeah. I think our focus should not be on what's divisive and what's not. If you're pushing for Black folks, someone who is uncomfortable is going to use that to say you're being divisive. We have to advocate for our interests in every single space, because if we're so caught up in thinking about division and how we're dividing, we're not going to be focused on moving the ball forward. And we have to move with those who are willing to move with us. It doesn't mean that we have to be angry at, especially our other people who may not be in it like we are, or those who may not be at the level of consciousness that we expect, right? Because most folks are not necessarily in movement every day. We actually have to be aware of what the people on our block. That's what I think. Like the people on the block, how are they involved? What is their level of knowledge? That's how I identify. And I don't see it as divisive if they're not at the level of consciousness that I expect, or, if someone is talking about Black specific policy. That word is often used to undermine our fights and to actually silence us so that we don't focus on Black folks and what Black folks need. So I always just kind of have that in my mind, because when it's used to, critical race theory is divisive because people are uncomfortable. But change doesn't happen until we have people who are comfortable with the status quo getting uncomfortable.
Oh, ain't that a big fact, Doc? Big fact. All right, let's go back to the comments. Karina, check that out. Karina said, at this point, the only way we can possibly get what we're asking for is to change the dynamic in the Senate, which means increasing the Democratic majority. Imagine Booker, Chambers, Beasley, and Demings there. Doc, what's your, because you said it, you call yourself a policy wonk, right? This is the thing that you do. But there is a lot of hope and there's a lot of faith in this political system and in the political space, and for Black folks, a lot of hope and faith in the Democratic Party. But how do we temper that faith with seeing our own power and seeing our own value to be able to go out and do something for ourselves, and not just expect the Democratic Party to do it all for us?
Well, I think it's just as you said, we have to recognize our own power. We have to recognize that we actually have the power. Our relationship to any political party should not be taken for granted. It should not be by default. And it also hinges on us recognizing there are multiple tools in the toolbox, right? So yes, folks should be registered to vote and actually vote. It's one of the lowest hanging fruit that we have. but we have to have people that are out in the streets, right? So that's an essential part of change. We have to have folks that are, I've been working in the policy space. What are we building? What is our vision, right? It's not just the things that we don't like about the current government or legislation. It is, what is the alternate legislation? What are the alternate systems that we're building that actually reflect our values? So we have to be in those spaces where policy is being drafted and advanced. We have to have relationships with elected officials that are not just every election come out and give us your vote, but that are in the off times. The work is actually in between the elections. And we have to be able to put pressure on any party, whether Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, that our interests are top of line, that we are not a monolithic body that is only valuable at the point of election. And we hear this rhetoric about we have your back and this and that, but then we can't, when it comes to asking for or demanding or putting forth policies that are actually beneficial for our community, all of a sudden it's crickets or it's too hard, right?
Yeah.
So part of our challenge is we have to know we have a whole host of tools in the toolbox for change. It is policy, it is activism, it is being out in the streets, it's voting.
Love it.
It is not just register to vote and vote for this person and then they do the work on our behalf, or we hope they do the work on our behalf. We cannot afford to have that mindset at all.
Absolutely. Bakari, I want to bring you back into this discussion on that. Anything comes up with you as we've been talking to Dr. Amara?
One, just grateful to have you in the space. I think this is, and Farajii, I'm only here on Fridays when Farajii allows me, but I think this is so much of what, what we've been talking about is what a strategy for those that are part of the Democratic Party look like, and I think what I feel like oftentimes, at least for myself, tends to lack is like the opportunity to engage creatively, right? So even just the language that you brought into the space to say, we have so many different strategies available in our toolbox, is true. There are a lot of other ways that we can engage. So I'm excited to have you in the space with us and speaking to more of those strategies that we can deploy.
Absolutely. And Doc, I want to share something else, another piece coming from this writing, this op-ed that Pastor DeSoros had put into the Washington Post. Well, Pastor said, we can't let Juneteenth become just another holiday, or worse, a holiday for only one segment of the country. We should see it for what it really is, the other half of the 4th of July. She said, these two holidays, which fall a mere 2 weeks apart, represent the best of America. The one celebrates the Declaration of Independence, which contains what the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass called saving principles. The other celebrates America's journey to live by those principles. I wanted to kind of just get your response and reaction to that. Do you agree with this description of the relationship between Juneteenth and the 4th of July? Because personally, I feel like it's something totally different. I don't know if I see it as hand in hand.
Yeah, I definitely can't say that I see it as hand in hand. I actually see Juneteenth as the reminder of the gap between the values that this country espouses and what the reality is, right? So it is that mirror that has to be held up to this country to show, yes, on 4th of July, everyone is celebrating the independence of the colonies from the British, right?
Right.
And this notions of liberty and justice for all, and all of these sort of values that undergird this country, that are supposed to undergird this country. But the reality is, a couple of weeks before, some folks were not even free, right?
And they didn't even know they were free.
No, exactly. They didn't know. And these are people who were enslaved in this very country. So I see it more as the mirror to show what the truth behind the veil, right? Because in this country, there's this a mythology almost, and perhaps mythology is a strong word, but there is this facade of freedom, liberty. It's an ideal, but we know it's an ideal, and there's reality that is accompanying, that's right behind that ideal that shows what the truth is. And so the relationship of the two holidays to me is, one is the reality, one is the reminder, one is the thing that shows us that, hey, we have a lot of work to do if we want to actually have these values become real for everyone, not just for wealthy white landowning men.
One is the reality and the other is the reminder that we still have a lot of work to do. I love that. I absolutely love it. And you know, when we have these conversations, my hope is that Black folks in particular, and I know with the pastor saying that it's just not for one segment of the population, but I still believe, Doc, that a lot of Black folks don't know exactly what happened on that day. And more importantly, the significance of that moment in relationship to our our ongoing struggle for liberation in this country. That needs to be taught. I'm not opposed to white people celebrating Juneteenth. What I am opposed to is white people telling the story or trying to dictate the narrative around Juneteenth. And then Black folks, we just like, oh, okay, that's just what happened, versus us having some very in-depth conversation, and not just about that particular time in history, but I think this leads to a bigger conversation about the fact that we still are, as you mentioned earlier, we're still in an unjust system, and that we are still in an oppressive state in this country, and that we have a duty to the children coming behind us to make sure that they not just know that history, but they also know what role they play into to changing that history as we move forward.
Absolutely. And it calls to mind the spate of, and really it's a plethora of anti-CRT legislation that's being passed now around the country. I mean, we really have to connect the dots, because even if people are starting to discover Juneteenth and its significance and what actually happened, you have an active effort in states across this country to ensure that the teaching of history cannot happen. In Florida, a white person could say that they were uncomfortable, and because they were uncomfortable about a conversation in the class, perhaps pertaining to race or some historical, I think in one instance it was Martin Luther King they were discussing, and can indicate that they felt uncomfortable, and for that teacher will be held accountable. That school district might be penalized. This is where we are. So we have, at the same time as Juneteenth has officially become a federal holiday, and we know that we have to continue to understand our history and to make sure that future generations know the history. You have active legislation being passed across the country to limit the teaching of history under the guise of being anti-CRT, so that knowledge cannot be passed. And we have to be aware of that, so that in our strategy, we are pushing back on those efforts. We are exposing those efforts so that we can actually ensure that our history is getting passed on in an accurate way, not just in our homes, which is where the first place it should be taught, but in our schools.
Absolutely. And you know what, Doc? It comes back to that statement you just made a few moments ago. There's the reality, and then there's the reminder. And that's where we are in this country. And I see that, right now, everybody's going to be talking about Black folks. Everybody's going to talk about Black history. Everybody's going to talk about, what happened to our people who were enslaved. But 2 weeks from now, we're going to see Black folks holding up the flag, cooking out. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, this is our liberation. This is our Independence Day. And it's like, you know it, Doc. Like, the messaging can go from here to there. It can in less than 60 seconds. And in 2022, we have so much that's challenging us. Like you mentioned, it's anti-CRT and all of those things. This is America. America will want you to believe something, but then in reality will make you feel like nothing is happening. You're right. You know what I'm saying? That's the America that we live in. And I'm personally tired of it. I am personally tired of it. And this is not about Black or white. This is just about this country has not had a very real conversation about its past of the transatlantic slave trade, the ongoing injustice that is affecting not just Black people in this country, but brown folks and other marginalized communities. We're not having those conversations. We're not having them. And the fact is that there is this fantasy that's being pushed on us to say, hey, no, we're moving past. And you got all of this is happening while we're talking about people running up on the Capitol, while we're talking about people can't talk about Black history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm recalling Shannon Sharp. He was doing an interview, and he was talking about just how much in this country the having to pass legislation so that Black folks or other people of color can do basic things. Right? We're still in that space where we have to pass legislation to do basic things, to get basic rights. And we can't lose sight of that. And it's part of the reason why, the other thing that I think we don't emphasize enough is what's good for Black people is good for this country, period. There is nothing that we can do that's beneficial to Black people that won't actually help and improve and better this country. And in fact, the reason why, a lot of the reason why this country is in the state that it's in is because we have not addressed how Black folks have been treated from the history of the transatlantic slave trade to all of the present legacies which we're experiencing, right? So we can't afford to have this notion to believe the hype or to drink the Kool-Aid, right? Yes, this country's a work in progress, but look at how difficult, look at voting rights, the voting rights legislation. Look at the current state of, there's a lot of research about home appraisals, lending practices. We have major banks like JP Morgan Chase that as of 2020, lent more in Chicago lent more to one predominantly white neighborhood than all of Chicago's Black neighborhoods combined.
Damn.
In 2020.
Damn.
Right? So people like to think, redlining it was in the past and all discrimination. There are present legacies that this country has not grappled with. So I personally am excited about conversations around reparations because it's a value of repair is the only way that this country can move forward. A value of repair.
And Doc, I would humbly submit that being honest.
Yes.
This country doesn't like the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're cultivating citizens as a result of that. Leadership and citizens, the constituents who don't like the truth. We have a disdain for the truth.
Yeah.
And that, as the scriptures say, the truth will set you free.
Absolutely.
This country we're caged up. And as a result of that, we need to speak the truth. Doc, I know we got a few more moments and I appreciate your time very quickly, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the work that the Movement for Black Lives is doing and how we can be supportive of that work.
Absolutely. So we are an ecosystem of hundreds of organizations around the country who are doing work at the local level, the state level, and the national level. Our goal is to win the rights, resources, and recognition for Black people, and that's across the board. So we, at the local level, we have folks who are working collectively to determine how cities should be spending those ARPA funds, the billions of dollars from the federal government in response to the pandemic. They are actually developing strategies on how those funds should be used in ways that actually benefit our communities, not just going to police and police infrastructure, but going to things like housing, education, the economic resilience of our communities. So that's happening at the local level. We have folks at the state level that are drafting legislation to expose the criminal legal system and all of the injustices there. So when it comes to bond, people having to pay cash bonds and how that is harmful to our communities, to prison gerrymandering, right? That's a big issue. So they're building state coalitions to address these issues at the state level and get legislation passed at the state level. At the federal level, we have the Breathe Act, which is our vision for what it takes to build strong communities, investments in education, investments in mental health resources, et cetera. And we have Congress people at the federal level that are carrying portions of that legislation and introducing them. We had Representative Cori Bush introduce the People's Response Act. We had Representative Ayanna Pressley introducing the Fixed Clemency Act, which addresses issues of clemency. We are very active this month on reparations and really showing people the broad scope of reparations, that it is not just the compensation component, but it is a systems push. How do we transform these systems so that we don't have a repeat of the same discrimination and bad outcomes that Black folks have been experiencing in this country? So all month in June, we addressed the issue of reparations year round, but in June in particular, we're really focused on getting people to understand what we mean for reparations at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. So it's organizing. It's folks, again, using all the tools we have in the toolbox, whether it's legislative and electoral politics, being out in the streets, which I think is always, effective. We're using all of these tools, again, to push our agenda and to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball and that we hold this administration accountable too, so that it's not just empty rhetoric that we're getting, but substantive change.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Amara Anya, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your intelligence and your insight. And how can people get more information about the movement for Black Lives?
They can definitely, we're on all of the social media. They can also go to m4bl.org. That's m4bl.org. And then we're on Twitter, IG, Facebook. Folks can check us out there. And we're always trying to build so people can get in touch, reach out, and hopefully we can connect and continue to build this work.
Well, let me just say to you, Doc, a lot of people have appreciated your insight. They've shown a lot of love for you in our YouTube, our Culture Crew online community, showing a lot of love to you on our YouTube and Facebook chat. So we got to bring you back on to discuss other issues. But I want to, again, thank you so much for your time, for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you. I really appreciated you both. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about Lizzo. It is Black Music Month, so it's going to be an interesting conversation. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
But Kari, I want to bring you back in. Welcome back to the show, folks. Great conversation with Dr. Amara for Movement for Black Lives, man.
For sure.
We needed that one. I felt like we got to end the week on a strong note since we're going into this powerful weekend, Bakari.
Yes, raise the vibrations,
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so look, I wanted to have a conversation. I thought this was very interesting. This is Black Music Month, and what I found to be interesting is how we are as Black artists with other people, but we're not the same with ourselves.
I hear you.
All right, so here's the situation. So Lizzo Everybody knows Lizzo, right? Y'all know Lizzo. This is the sister that, you know, she has taken her pain, turned it into power as a songstress, you know, creating music. She says she wants to empower the big girls. Everybody know about Lizzo. Well, in a recent song, she got a song called Girls. She uses a term SPAZ, spaz. And according to the Washington Post, Ariel and Keenan, let's post this. According to the Washington Post, the new version of the song Girls replaces the term spaz lyric with hold me back. In the United States, the term has long been another way of saying freaking out. But the disability community claims the word derives from spastic diplegia, which is a common type of cerebral palsy. Some people also note that using the word to suggest you're going crazy is hurtful to the mental illness community. So, what do you think Lizzo did when she heard about this from the disabled community? Well, she changed her song lyric and pretty much re-recorded the song. Had the song re-recorded. So she put out a statement saying this, folks. Take a look at what Lizzo had to say. Mm-hmm. Let's post that second quote. She said, "I'm proud to say there's a new version of Girls with a lyric change. This is the result of me listening and taking action. As an influential artist, I'm dedicated to being part of the change I've been waiting to see in the world." I like it, Lizzo. I like it. But here's my issue. And I don't know if I'm too far in this whole thing, Bakari. But how many terms do we listen to in music that offends Black people? And yet those terms never change, even from Black artists. I remember Oprah having this conversation with Jay-Z and other hip-hop artists years ago. And she was talking about the use of the N-word. And, you know, at that time, Jay and other artists was like, oh, it's a term of endearment, blah, blah, blah. And Oprah was like, but I heard that term when I was a little girl growing up in the South, and it was a hurtful term. It was offensive. It was this. You know, you calling the Black woman B words, and the artists will always well, I'm not saying that you know, I have a mother, I love my mother, I love my sister. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking to myself, what do we have to do? Is if the disabled community, and I'm fine with them doing that. I think if the disabled community says this is offensive, we want it to change, and they galvanize or organize to do that, and then the artist can respond to them. Why aren't we seeing the same type of response, Bakari, from the artists to change their lyrics that they know can be offensive? I'm trying to see, is this a double standard? Is this hypocrisy? What are we seeing here?
I don't think it's a double standard. I want to say I applaud Lizzo for making the change. I really do. I admire her. I think it shows an example of what it looks like, what it could look like in real time, to say, "Oop, I messed up. I didn't set out with the intention to do that. Now that I know better. Let me show you what it means to actually do better." So I applaud her. I think the distinction is when you are a part of a group and when you're not part of the group. So I think that, you know, with the Oprah and Jay-Z conversation, shout out to the accent that you just put on. I didn't know you had it in you, brother. But part of that distinction, right, is that Oprah and Jay-Z are both part of that same group that we consider, right, culturally, you can say the N-word if you are part of the Black community, right? If you are somebody that could be called the N-word, then we see ourselves as having this permission to use the term, right? You could reclaim it if it's one that has been used to describe you. I think the distinction here with Lizzo is that the term, and you read out the condition that's associated with the term spaz, right? She recognizes that she's not a part of a community that is disabled through that specific diagnosis. So I think that Lizzo was saying, hey, you know what? This is not a term that's ever offended me. I've been saying it for years. It never had this negative connotation. This is what it's meant for me. But I'm not part of this community that it actually describes. I'm not part of the community that it, from a medical standpoint, that it actually refers to. And because I'm on the outside looking in, I can acknowledge and respect what you all are communicating to me. So I will also say, I think as a Black and queer person at the intersections, it's like, this is, what a lot of folks experience, when it comes to asking or requesting, demanding the use of different pronouns, right? It's, well, you don't see yourself as a part of that, so you don't have to be bothered, or, we're reading too much into it. And like I said, I applaud Lizzo. I think that she's listening, so to me, and I hear a lot of folks saying it's too sensitive, but we're sensitive people. Like, why pretend that we're not sensitive people? And if she has the access to capital to re-record the song and low-key create even more buzz as a result of doing something positive that's more inclusive as opposed to being divisive, why not, man? Like, so to me, I think it's a step in the right direction. I know there are a lot of people that are saying it's too deep and it's not that serious.
I think it is.
I think it is. I see her as bringing more people in as opposed to shutting more people out. So
I would agree with you there. I think it is. I think it was mature of her to say, you know what, I was wrong. But I tend to see that there is a double standard there, though.
I hear you. I do.
Yeah, I think there's a double standard just because we have complained. I mean, Black people, we have complained. We have tried to quote unquote. I remember years ago. Y'all remember those demonstrations to bury the N-word? Y'all remember that? You know what I mean? I saw it went so far, Bakari. I saw one situation where they actually had like a coffin. They were standing in the grave.
Yes.
And they were like, we're going to bury the N-word. And it's like, it's all performative. But then at the end of the day, it didn't catch fire as to change the culture.
But again, I think that the distinction is that Lizzo can make this because she's saying, I was corrected as an outsider to the community that this particular word impacts. She can make that change. I think if we were as Black folks organizing around a non-Black person using that term, that would be something different. We'd be telling them not to use the term. But I think within our own group, right, we are allowed to have discourse within our own cultural group and to decide whether or not you're going to actually use it. So I hear you, and I think I understand where you're coming from, but I guess I don't necessarily see it as a double standard, because in this instance, it's an intercommunal dialogue that we're having, as opposed to someone from the outside coming in and saying, I'm going to call you N-word. I'm going to continue to use N-word in my music and my whatever other, materials. So that's kind of how I see that breakdown. So I don't know if it's necessarily, it feels like to me it's slightly apples and oranges in terms of how we decide who gets to say what,
It could be. I just think that it's interesting that we're living in a time and a space where fans of certain music can kind of dictate the music that they want to hear, right? And it's always contingent upon the artist to change it. For example, here's a prime example. So on one side, here's an artist like Lizzo who's saying, okay, y'all don't like it, I offended you, that's fine, I'll change it. But then, like, Drake's new album just dropped, Honestly Nevermind. That dropped on early at midnight this morning. And some people react and say, oh, this is the worst Drake album ever, and this is terrible. This dance hall, what is this mess? And Drake was like, if you don't like it, that's because you ain't catch up to it yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not in a space of like trying to appeal to or trying to get more people to be a part of his fan club. He's like, hey, it is what it is.
Though he has in the past, when that snippet that he sampled off of R. Kelly's album came up, But
see, and I guess that's the thing. Like, it's like, what are the boundaries? Because I remember when the whole R. Kelly thing dropped, like when Surviving R. Kelly, then you saw all these artists, Chance the Rapper, and all these different artists who's like, oh, I don't want this song going. But it's like, bruh, you mean to tell me y'all just realized that R. Kelly was this type of dude after the song was made?
Yeah.
But now you don't want him on your album. somebody who was it? Somebody just put out an album and they had just a couple of samples of R. Kelly, and people were like, oh my gosh. You know, and it's like, oh, Kendrick, even with Kendrick's latest album, people are like, oh my gosh, you reference R. Kelly, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but y'all do know that this situation with R. Kelly been around for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now you acting like you brand new. It's just, I think people pick and choose what's acceptable. And I guess my bigger point to all of this is, at the end of the day, we determine what the culture is. And I don't think a lot of us like really understand that if you don't like what an artist has to say, same thing that Rick Ross did when he talked about putting something in the woman's drink, and how the survivor community was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he had to come out and make a statement and all of those things. Like, we determine the culture.
Yep.
Like, if the artist feels like this is acceptable because the people don't push back on it, then the artist is going to continue to make content that speaks to that level of silence or that level of ignorance.
Yep.
So I think I just think that culturally it's important to have these conversations, to highlight this, to say, you know what? We do have power. You can tell an artist. Now, you may like the N-word, but I don't like it. You may like for women to be called the B word. I don't like it. But guess what? If you don't say anything, if that's cool for you, then the artist is not going to feel compelled to change it or to mature from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought just an interesting take, Bakari.
I hear you. I agree. I think if we were to see a subset of Lizzo's fans, that spoke out about her using the N-word, if that was, something that was common in her music, I don't necessarily think that it is, but I think if we were to see a subgroup come out and say that I think would be the really interesting, really interesting conversation to see whether or not she would be equally as compelled to make that level of change.
Right. Absolutely. Let me just share with a couple of people. Say very quickly. Karina checked in and said, look, I don't like that we call each other the N-word. I don't use it because there's too much pain behind it. I think we look foolish embracing what is meant to demean our humanity. Yeah, I would agree. T. Nixon said, banned words in society wholesale may not be possible. The gesture and change is great. Perhaps better language association can solve this. Yep. And I would say, T. Nixon, that as consumers of creative content, that we demand better and more. There it is. All right, Bakari, we got a great big weekend happening. Anything that you want us to be mindful of as we go into this powerful weekend of celebrating fathers, of Juneteenth, of course, we continue to observe and celebrate Pride. What are some of the things that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, man, I think most of us, so many of us are wearing multiple hats. We show up as our full selves when we can, I think, acknowledge all of the intersections.
Yeah.
So like you said, Father's Day, Pride, Juneteenth, all sort of jam-packed into one weekend, at least here in Baltimore. So I think for me, it's encouraging everybody to celebrate all of those parts of your identity. I don't think we have to make things so bifurcated. I don't think they have to just be one or the other, black and white. I think we can find time to really just experience the spectrum of our full identities. That's what I'm hoping that our folks continue to do. Take a break from some of this content. Farajii is heavy. It's heavy. The last thing I would say is just encouraging people to take a step back, take a deep breath, and really just 1, 2, and 3 real solid deep breaths. Ground yourself and find a reason that you're happy and grateful and thankful to continue to be a Black person.
Whether you are part of if you're part of the LGBTQIA community, whether you are a father or whether you are just celebrating Juneteenth, guess what, folks? Never forget your Blackness. That's all I would have to say. Don't forget the beauty, the value, the importance of knowing and accepting your Blackness. Bakari Jones, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, sis. Thank you so much for being so good for the culture.
Absolutely. Happy Father's Day, Farajii. Peace.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Folks, that's going to do it for us this week. We had a lot of big conversations. Big shout out to our very special guest, Dr. Amara Anya. and her great brilliance on the matter of Juneteenth. And I just want to thank each and every one of you. I mean, throughout this whole week, especially, you have been so engaging, so interactive with us. We truly, truly appreciate it. Your thoughts, your insight is driving this show along as we continue to provide conversations and have guests and just overall have a better understanding of who we are and what time we're living in. So I appreciate each and every one of you for your insights. So many of you are checking in, new voices. We got some voices that are just riding along with us. I can't thank you enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, we ask that you support us here at Black Star Network. Go to our website right now, blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you support this all Black, unfiltered, unadulterated, unapologetic Black platform like never before. You can support us through those platforms there that you see. But more importantly, even if you can't give any financial donation, you can certainly share it with your family and friends and do the part of making sure that Black media stays strong and that we stay on air as well. So make sure you support us at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, folks, stay tuned. Up next is RMU, Roland Martin Unfiltered with Big Brother Roland. And of course, as always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll have another set of great conversations on Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Happy Father's Day to all of the men out there. Brothers, enjoy your weekend. If you're celebrating Pride, if you're celebrating Juneteenth, again, don't forget your Blackness. Don't run from it. Just be who you are and always be yourself. There it is. There it is. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Peace.
iPhone 13 on us for every customer. Current, new, everyone. To show the love.
How about sushi? I just had sushi for lunch yesterday.
How about tacos? Automatic emergency braking, one of 6 advanced safety features standard on every 2022 Chevy Equinox. Find new technology. Find new roads. Chevrolet.